Okay, hi everyone. So in this video I'm going to do a revision of rocks. Okay, so we'll just try and go through it as quick as we can. So a rock is literally the hard material on the earth's crust. It makes up the earth's crust. It's a thin layer, but it's that hard solid material. Okay? Rocks are basically made up of loads of different ingredients. The ingredients in the rocks are called minerals. Okay? It could be made up of animal remains, it could be made up of plants, it could be made up of lava, vegetation that had decayed, loads of different materials in rocks. Okay, rocks vary from each other depending on their size, depending on the color, the mineral content, what they're made up of, whether they're hard or soft rock, are they easy to break down, hard to break down, and their texture, are they rough or smooth. Okay, so if we get straight stuck into it, we divide rocks into three groups. If you were to find three different rock types in your back garden, they might all belong to the same group of rock, or they might belong to three different groups. So it depends on how they were formed. So the first group of rocks that we have are called igneous rocks. Now think, if you ignite something, you're setting it on fire. So think magma and lava. So any rock that belongs to the igneous rock group were formed from magma or lava. So get that into the head and that'll help. So igneous rocks are formed during volcanic activity. So when a volcano happens, you're going to get igneous rocks forming as a result. Okay, so you've two situations that can happen. As we know, when two plates collide, and when, we'll say, a section of one of the plates slips or sinks down into the mantle, we know that that section of the plate melts into magma, and that magma is bubbling hot, and it moves up into the crust of the earth, and it gathers itself in a magma chamber. Okay, from there the magma is either going to go in two different directions. The magma will either rise deep into the earth's crust and stay there underground. Okay, and when I say it stays there, it melts out a little space for itself. If the magma does that, and if it rises into the earth's crust and cools and stays deep in the earth's crust, it's going to cool and harden, and it's actually going to cool really slowly, okay, because it's not exposed to the air yet, and it's going to harden and it's going to form a solid rock called granite. If the magma rises straight up to the crust and reaches us at the earth's surface, the magma is then called lava. When the lava pours out, it meets the cold air and it cools and hardens really, really quickly. That forms basalt rock. So they're the two types of igneous rocks. You have granite and you have basalt. So if the magma during a volcano rises deep into the earth's crust and stays there and cools and hardens there, that's granite rock. That's intrusive igneous rock inside. Whereas if the magma rises straight up to the earth's crust, onto the earth's surface, and pours out as lava, that cools and hardens to form basalt. That's an extrusive rock. Think exterior, outside. Okay, so igneous rocks are formed because of volcanoes. Now, just getting straight onto it. So, granite and basalt. Let's start off with granite. What do we know about it? First of all, know and be able to explain how it's formed. So, granite is formed when magma rises up from the magma chamber up into the earth's crust. When the magma rises deep into the earth's crust, it stays there. It does not go up to the earth's surface. So when the magma rises deep into the earth's crust, it stays there and it cools slowly over millions of years. It takes so long for the magma to cool and harden into a solid rock because it's not exposed to the air and it's still close to the magma chamber and to the mantle underneath. So when the magma eventually does cool and harden, it forms a solid rock called granite. Now, because the magma took so long to cool, it had plenty of time for large crystals to form. Okay, so there's a beautiful crystally effect and speckles of crystals when you look at granite rock. Okay, so just like I said there, large crystals have time to form. These crystals can include quartz. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, if granite is formed deep inside the earth's crust, how come we have granite worktops or granite tiles nowadays or granite headstones? The reason why we have granite nowadays is because the overlying rock over time above it, the rock above the granite could have been limestone, it could have been basalt, it could have been absolutely anything, has been weathered and worn down by the weathering over time. We've studied physical weathering, freeze-thaw action. We studied chemical weathering. So when the weathering over millions of years wears down the rock on the Earth's surface, it would have exposed the granite underneath. Okay, so that's how we're lucky enough to have it. What do we know about granite? It's a multicolored rock because there's loads of different minerals present inside in it, quartz and all that. Okay, so it's a multicolored rock. It can vary from black to pink to grey. What do we use it for? We use it for countertops. We use it for tiles. They use it in the building industry. It's a very expensive rock. Okay, so you'll pay well for a granite worktop. It can be used to make monuments and headstones as well. We do have it in Ireland, okay, but it wouldn't be the finest quality of granite. We probably most likely import a lot of our granite from other countries. We can find it in the Wicklow Mountains. And in the Wicklow Mountains, the overlying rock has been exposed. It has been weathered away and it has exposed the granite, which tells us once upon a time, millions and millions of years ago, we had volcanoes in Ireland. Okay, so that's granite in the Wicklow Mountains. Know that example. That's formed inside the Earth's crust when magma cools slowly over millions of years. Large crystals form. Okay, the opposite to that one, then the other igneous rock is basalt. Okay, so basalt is formed outside on the Earth's surface. It's an extrusive igneous rock. So how does it form? It forms, I'll just stick back to this picture, when magma rises up through the Earth's crust and pours out onto the Earth's surface as lava. So it's when the magma reaches the Earth's surface and pours out as lava, it reaches us. Now, when the lava reaches the cold air that we're living in, the lava cools and hardens actually really, really quickly. So it cools and hardens into a solid rock called basalt. But because it cools and hardens really quickly, very few crystals have time to form. So if there are any crystals, they'll be absolutely tiny. So it doesn't have that lovely glittery, shiny crystal effect. So that's a picture of the lava. If you were to go up to Iceland now, look at the volcano, look at the lava cooling around the volcano. The lava will just cool and turn into a black, heavy black rock. Okay? So it ranges from black to grey. We do have basalt rock in Ireland, up in the north, in the Antrim Derry region. They call it the Antrim Derry Plateau. Millions of years ago, we had a volcano up there, and the lava just kept spilling out and pouring out and cooling and hardening to form a big plateau or a big area of basalt rock. You might be more familiar with the Giant's Causeway name of the Antrim Derry Plateau. It's the most famous part of the Antrim Derry Plateau is the Giant's Causeway. It's just got like over 40,000 columns of basalt rock. What was so unusual about when the basalt was cooling and forming up in the Antrim Derry region at the time was it cooled so quickly, way too quickly, that the rock broke up into columns. But it broke up into hexagonal columns, six-sided columns. So that's why it's such a big tourist attraction. It's an extremely resistant rock. It's very hard, very tough for the weather to break it down actually. Like even if you look at its exposure to the sea there, the sea will be wearing that down for a long time, as opposed to softer rocks. So it's an extremely resistant rock, so it's ideal for surfacing roads. Okay? So that's granite and basalt. So remember, two igneous rocks, granite and basalt. They're both formed during a volcano. Granite is formed deep inside the Earth's crust. Or basalt is formed on the Earth's surface. Okay, they're both very resistant hard rocks. Okay, the second group of rocks are sedimentary rocks. So they're rocks that are formed from sediments. What are sediments? Remains. So what are these rocks? Sedimentary rocks formed from the remains of loads of things. They're formed from the remains of sand, broken up rocks, plants that are decaying, vegetation that's decaying, and the remains of animals, skeletons of animals, and particularly the skeletons of fish. Okay, so like sedimentary rocks can be formed from the remains of absolutely loads of stuff. Like if you take limestone, it's a sedimentary rock. It's formed from the remains of sea creatures, their skeletons. If you take coal, that's formed from the remains of decaying vegetation. If you take sandstone, that's the remains of sand and stones that just gather together. So sedimentary rocks are rocks that are formed from the sediments or the remains of other rocks, sand, which is broken down rock, plants that are decaying vegetation, and animal remains. Okay? And basically, how sedimentary rocks form in general is over time, the wind blows all of these particles of sand all along the Earth's surface, say blowing them from Mallow to Kanturk. Okay, naturally the wind will pick up particles of sand. Pebbles will be transported by the wind. It'll be transported by rivers. The sea creatures will die. What will happen to the skeletons of the sea creatures? They'll pile up on the seabed. That's where their bodies go. And gradually, over millions of years, layers of sand keep piling up. Layers of pebbles keep piling up. Layers of skeletons remains keeps piling up. Layers of decaying vegetation keeps piling up. And the weight of these layers press down. They compact and they compress and solidify. They mix with water and they harden, okay, to form a solid rock. But as you can imagine, they will be the softer variety of the rocks. They'd be easy enough to weather and to break down. So sedimentary rocks are formed from the remains and sediments of sand, rocks, decaying vegetation, plants, and their animal remains and sea creatures. Okay, let's get straight stuck into it. So we're going to look at limestone. Limestone is the most common and most famous sedimentary rock. Limestone is formed from the remains of sea creatures. Think about in the sea over millions of years. That's a lot of sea creatures living in the sea over millions of years. If they're not caught by the fishermen in the fishing nets, well then they're just dying naturally. Where does the skeleton of the sea creature go? Well, it's just going to literally sink down to the bottom of the seabed. Can you imagine all of the layers of the sea creatures, the skeletal remains of the sea creatures that pile up on the seabed over time? It must be an enormous amount of skeletal remains. So they keep piling up and literally piling up on top of each other. Like you take a rubbish and you dump it in the middle of the floor, and you come tomorrow and dump another load on top of it. Next week, dump another load of rubbish on top of it. It's like dumping layers and layers and layers of skeletal remains of sea creatures on the seabed. If you keep doing that over millions and millions of years, and you mix in the seawater with that, it glues all those layers together. The weight of the top layer of the skeletal remains crushes down on the lower layers of the skeletal remains and compacts it together. It solidifies it, it compresses it down, it compacts it together, and the seawater glues it together into a solid rock called limestone. So you've got sea creatures, fish, seashells, etc. Okay, so like I said, the layers of the skeletons pile up over time on the seabed, and they compress and compact and cement together into a solid limestone rock. So lads, it takes millions of years for that to happen. So like if you pick up a lot of limestone rock, you can see the skeletal remains in the rock. You can see the fossils. Fossils are just the bones or the remains of the sea creatures. Okay. Limestone can vary. It's a light coloured rock. It can vary from white to grey. Like in Ireland now, our limestone is very grey colour. In Paris, they have a gorgeous kind of a sandy kind of a colour limestone rock. So we've limestone in practically every single county in Ireland. Okay, what's the features of limestone? What does it look like? Because it was literally formed from layers and layers of skeletal remains piling up on top of each other. When you look at limestone, you can see the horizontal layers of the limestone rock as it was formed. So each horizontal layer of limestone that you can see in the picture in front of you there, each layer or chunk of horizontal limestone is called strata. That's just handy to know that term, be able to point it out in a diagram. What we also know about limestone is it's got loads of gaps and cracks in it. Okay, so it's got loads of areas for water and rainfall to pass down through it. So it's a permeable rock. A permeable rock means that it allows water to pass through it. Okay, so that means though it's more open to weathering. So limestone will be weathered and broken down easily because it's permeable. Our most famous example of where we find loads of limestone in Ireland is the Burn in County Clare. Okay, so it's a large area limestone rock. What do we use it for when we dig it out, and who wants it? Well, you can use it to make a monument. It's very impressive looking. Churches, the GPO up in Dublin on O'Connell Street is built using limestone. It's actually, lime is a raw material for making cement. It actually is one of the most important ingredients in cement. It really solidifies and holds those blocks together. Farmers will use ground down limestone when they turn it into a lime. It turns it into a powder. So you're literally getting the rock and breaking it down into a powder substance. And the farmers spread the lime on the land and it makes the soil really fertile. So we've loads of uses for limestone. The other sedimentary rock is sandstone. Look at the name of it. It's formed from sand and bits of stone. Okay, so it's a reddy browny colour. Very easy to break down as well, and it can have a very grainy kind of a texture to it. So sandstone was formed over millions of years as well. And basically what happened was millions of years ago, I want you to imagine the mountains back in Killarney, okay? And the weather and the wind beating down on the mountains in Killarney, okay? And they chipping off bits of rock time and time again. Think of weathering, being exposed to the weather, the wind, the rain, etc. and the ice. So bits of sand and bits of rocks were broken off of the mountain over time. And this sand and the bits of rocks were transported. They were carried by wind and carried by rivers as well. And they were eventually dropped off and deposited on the seabed or on the lake. Think of the Lake of Killarney and the bed of the lake there. And the layers of sand and bits of pebbles built up and built up and built up over time as they were deposited on top of each other. The weight of the sand and the pebbles crushed down on top of each other, compacted and cemented together to form a solid rock called sandstone. Okay, so sandstone then varies from brown to red in colour. It's got a lot of iron in it, and that can kind of rust as well when the rain mixes with it, so it gives it that rusty reddy colour. What do we use sandstone for? It builds lovely walls, doesn't it? Stone walls. People might put it on their porch, under windowsills. A lovely stone wall out the front. So it's back in the mountains in Killarney, the McKilliguddy Reeks in County Kerry. Coal would also be a sedimentary rock. You might use coal in the fire for the wintertime. It gives out great heat. Coal is a rock. It's just formed from decaying vegetation. That's all it's formed from. Okay? The final group of rocks then are metamorphic rocks. Metamorphic rocks were actually once igneous or sedimentary rocks, imagine, but they were changed by heat or pressure. So basically, a metamorphic rock was once limestone, or was once sandstone, or might have been once basalt. But what happened to the limestone or the sandstone or the basalt was during a volcano or during folding, magma came in contact with it and it melted the rock. And if you pour magma over limestone or over basalt, it's going to change the appearance of it. It's going to melt it and it's a new rock. Or if you have two plates colliding and they're squeezing limestone or squeezing the basalt rock, you're squeezing and buckling the rock and changing the shape of it during folding. Now the rock looks different. So now it's called a metamorphic rock. So a metamorphic rock was once an igneous or sedimentary rock that now looks different. It's changed. It was changed by heat or pressure. Okay? So look at that picture there. That explains it really well. So the Earth's crust, the rock that we live on the Earth's crust, it can be made up of loads of it. Like in Ireland, we've loads of limestone rock, loads of sandstone rock underneath us. Okay? That's what our crust is made up of underneath us here in Ireland. If we were to get a volcano in the morning, and if magma was to rise up through the Earth's crust, magma would come in contact with our limestone and sandstone rock, and it would melt it, and it would change the appearance of it. Therefore, now it's a new rock. Therefore, now we call it a metamorphic rock. That's when a rock is changed by heat during a volcano. Where does the pressure come from? When the rocks are colliding and they're squeezing and they're pushing against each other, and that's called folding. Okay, I explained that to you in a previous video clip. So it's buckling the rock. It's changing the shape of it. Therefore, it's a new rock. Okay, so heat and pressure. So you have two types of, the most common types of metamorphic rocks are marble and quartzite. So marble is a metamorphic rock and it's beautiful. It's very expensive, looks fabulous, very much in demand, but very expensive. So how was marble formed? Marble rock was once limestone rock. Imagine that. So marble was once limestone rock, but the limestone rock was changed by heat and pressure. So think the Earth's crust was made up of limestone rock. All of a sudden, the plates collide and a volcano happens. Magma rises up through the crust, so its magma is rising up through the limestone rock. And as the magma comes in contact with the limestone rock, it melts it. So it's changing the texture, the appearance, the ingredients in it. So the limestone now looks different. So now we call it marble. Where's the pressure coming from? The plates colliding and squeezing that once limestone rock and buckling it and changing the appearance of it. And that's changed now into marble. So marble was once limestone rock that was changed by heat or pressure during volcano and during folding. So limestone changed into marble. Pure marble. Marble comes in loads of different colours. Pure marble is white in colour, but it can vary, okay? It can vary from red to green to black. It depends on what the customer demands, really. Marble can be easily quarried. You can easily slice it out, cut it out, and polish it up. Okay, very expensive. Beautiful marble fireplaces, headstones, tables, tiles, etc. Now, we do have some marble in Ireland, naturally, because we had volcanoes. Okay, Ireland is full of limestone rock. We did once upon a time have volcanoes. So obviously we did have a little bit of marble forming. So we have green marble in Connemara, okay? And we have actually red marble in County Cork. I think it's just outside Fermoy, actually. Not sure if any of you've passed it before, if you know of it. Italy would be very famous for its marble. There's a quarry in Italy, Carrara. Carrara is the name of the quarry, and Carrara marble comes out of there. And it's world famous, world renowned. They even say that the artist Michelangelo, if you've ever heard of him, that he made past tense when he was alive. He made sculptures, beautiful monuments and sculptures, but he made it using the marble from Carrara marble in Italy. So there's a bit of information for you there. There's one of his sculptures. The other metamorphic rock then is just quartzite. So quartzite was once sandstone. Okay, that's literally was changed by heat or pressure. So again, the Earth's crust was made up of sandstone rock. All of a sudden, the plates collide, cause a volcano. Magma rises up through the Earth's crust. Magma comes into contact with the sandstone, changes the sandstone, melts it, changes the appearance, changes its makeup. Now that sandstone is converted, and now we call it new rock. It's changed into quartzite. The pressure from the plates colliding buckled the sandstone rock and changed it into quartzite. So quartzite was once sandstone that was changed by heat and pressure. Okay. So what colour is it? It's just a very kind of greyish kind of a colour. Greyish, whitish colour. It's an extremely tough resistant rock. Okay. We do have it in Croagh-Patrick, County Mayo. We know that Croagh-Patrick is a kind of a hill that many people climb in a pilgrimage every year. It's an extremely resistant rock. Okay. So there are your two rocks. So they're the three rock groups, lads. The three rock groups are igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic. Igneous, your two rocks, they're formed by volcanoes. You have granite and basalt. Sedimentary rocks are formed from the remains or sediments of plants, animals, sand, broken up rocks. Your most common sedimentary rocks are limestone and sandstone. And metamorphic rocks were rocks that were once changed. They were once igneous or sedimentary rocks. They were changed by heat or pressure. And your two common metamorphic rocks are marble and quartzite. Okay, moving on past that. Actually, I'll do that in a separate video.